everything that is put into the chat box will also be recorded. So just be conscious of that as you comment. And I won't hold anybody up any longer. Caroline, if you would like to proceed. And Laura, you can stop sharing if you don't mind. Thanks. Over to you, Caroline. Living with teenagers, what a subject to be. How?
You can hear me perfectly now.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Great. Okay, that's fantastic. Living with teenagers. How fortunate people are to be living with teenagers. I don't think any parent, well, maybe some parents might say it, but I think it's actually a particularly difficult time for parents when teenagers hit that stage of development, and particularly now. I think it's just, I keep saying to everyone, ordinarily, before the pandemic ever hit, I would say that life is messy, you know, it's just not straightforward. And now this is particularly abnormal, difficult, worse than messy, because teenagers are very much stuck at home and parents are stuck at home. So it's just a very, very tricky time. But I'd be saying that firstly, reach out and ask for help. Jackie just reminded me again that we spent a lovely time working together a little while ago in Jackie's previous life. And I would say that for any parent or for anybody here this evening who is struggling or feeling that they're stressed out or they need extra support, or that they don't want to discuss their difficulties with their family members, or sometimes people don't want to let on to their friends that they're finding this tough, help is at hand. Grow.ie. Provide weekly support groups. Everything that's said is confidential. It's very practical. It's also, I know that there are lots of different supports online that you'd be signposting if anybody does need signposting at the end of this talk to the two supports that are available in your local area. It's just that Grow is fantastic from the point of view that you could be in a group with nobody that you'll ever meet, because the groups are from all over Ireland at the moment. So in terms of parenting, the very first thing is reach out if you're in difficulty at the moment. Don't let stress overtake you. It's very difficult to deal with children if you're stressed out of your head, even if they're not your own children. For teachers, anybody working with children, I know it's a little bit different now when children are going to be returning to school, so that you have that added I guess in one way it's a freedom, because the children are going to be returning to school, so that there'll be some element of home life that might be a little bit different. So in terms of my talk this evening, it is all about, firstly, I know I did speak last month about self-care. I'm also going to insist that you try and exercise self-care now. Again, when dealing with teenagers, how mind you reflects on your teenagers. And the reason I say this is, what are you like to live with at the moment? Are your family walking on eggshells? And only you know the answer to that. When we're anxious and stressed, we're not that easy to live with. We're actually quite difficult to live with. So self-care and exercising self-care as a parent is absolute number one priority, because it helps you manage how you are with your children, how you react to them. And as you know, your reactions determine the outcome usually of what's going to happen next. So I'm really selling self-care as my number one priority this evening for all parents. Secondly, after the self-care routine, understanding what anxiety is. I'm going to explain all about anxiety this evening, what happens in your body, what it actually means, how you can manage anxiety. And the reason being, it's the same for teenagers as it is for adults. Everything that you experience as an adult when you're feeling anxious and stressed is exactly what your teenager will experience. So if you understand it yourself, you can explain it to your teenager and to what's going on. But I would not, at the end of this talk, turn around to your teenager and say, oh, well, I know all about it. I know that's just anxiety. Or I had heard a talk the other night. And do not negate what your child is going through. Always validate your children's emotions and feelings and reactions. If your child is feeling anxious, then say, this is a difficult time. This is a really strange time that we're living in. I understand that this is difficult. Tell me more about it. So I'll come back to that again later on. But in terms of anxiety, we have this fantastic capacity to be able to plan for our futures. And I'm not sure that any other, apart from animals that hunt, but it's instinctive. We can plan, we can goal set, we can make plans all for the future. However, what happens with humans is that planning can turn into what if scenarios, so that we end up worrying about things that may or may not happen. So if we've worried for so long, we can actually think that we're doing a really helpful thing. Well, I'm planning, you know, if this is going to happen, well, then I'll say this, or then I'll be able to do that, which sounds very effective, but actually worrying about things doesn't ever solve or create an outcome. It just wastes very valuable time when you could be using that creativity for something else. It really is your imagination. No amount of worry will ever determine or predict an outcome, but it makes you feel like you're giving yourself some control over an outcome. It is still imaginary. Worry doesn't change anything. It gives us an illusion of control, but it doesn't help us predict the future. So what can actually happen with us is that we can worry to the extent that it causes us stress, and that stress then can cause us to feel it in our bodies. And anxiety, believe it or not, is a beneficial reaction. Anxiety helps us get out of danger. If something bad is happening, anxiety motivates us. It is our natural response that's been there for time immortal, from when we were hunter-gatherers. And if a hunter-gatherer is outside in the wilds waiting, being quiet, waiting to kill an animal to bring it home to feed the family, you need to be alert and listening for everything. You need to be attuned to, if that white tooth, that saber tiger is going to come and kill you, you need to be fully alert for it. So that's what our anxiety, that's a leftover from then. It's our freeze, flight, or fight response. And those three things actually are equal. So it's freeze, flight, or fight. The freeze is that we'd often get stuck. I often say that if there was an intruder in my home, I would actually be paralyzed with fear. I get stuck. I am that frozen person. The fight or flight is exactly what it is. Somebody else will be out the window and running a mile down the road before they'll look back, and somebody else will go down and take that intruder on full force. So what happens in our bodies? It's the same. It's humans. This is what happens. We have a physiological reaction to a potential perceived danger or threat. So physical, our heart starts pounding, our breathing changes, it becomes shallow. We will start sweating. We might get a dry mouth because that fluid is taken away for use elsewhere. Our bladder will actually release any urine. Our digestive system stops working because it says, well, if you're going to be running down the road, you need to be lighter. You don't need to carry any of that. It's the same with having to pee 10 times before a presentation or something like that, or an exam. And so the danger, you're reacting as if there's a masked gunman hiding under your kitchen table, or as if there is a saber-toothed tiger waiting to kill you. But the reality is you may just be going for a job interview, or you might be anxious about meeting friends that you haven't seen for a long time, which is actually probably going to be experienced by a lot of people after this lockdown, once we're set loose. And by the way, that is going to happen. We've had pandemics before. We will have an end to this pandemic. We will meet our friends again. There will be a time when there is no mask wearing, believe it or not. It seems like so alien now, but it will come. There were scenes in Wuhan after the pandemic was cleared, and there were beach parties where everyone was up on top of everyone. They were all out swimming together. And it's like, oh my God, that doesn't even look real, but it is. So our brains can't actually tell what it is we're responding to. So whether it is a mask on man, or whether it is just meeting friends and working ourselves up, we have the same physical reaction. And it's important for people to bear that in mind, because often tummy trouble in children, even in teens, they might get a pain in their tummy, they can feel really off, and they are feeling really off. It's a real thing. They're not imagining that tummy pain. They're not imagining being off their food because they don't want to eat. Other people will find that they turn to food when they're feeling anxious because it actually helps them change that, I suppose, internal dialogue, and it gives them something to do rather than worry. So that's the physical reaction to what's going on in your mind. Sometimes people will feel anxious and they can't actually find a solid reason. That can happen too. So you can have this anxious feeling in your body. You might have a tummy in knots. I don't think it's like butterflies. I think it's more like bats or something. It's like a cartwheel in your stomach. So it's pure adrenaline. We are governed by our hormones. So in order to rein in that anxious feeling, we need to take charge. And one of the best ways of taking charge of what's going on in our bodies is physical exertion, because you are doing what your body is prepared to do by exercising it. The blood is pumping to your muscles. You are ready. Your heart rate is already up. You are ready to run for the hills. So use your body. And this is non-negotiable with your children. Even when there is no sport, they do not have to be involved with any clubs. Physical exercise is paramount for managing and maintaining anxiety, worry, and stress levels. You utilize the hormones when you're causing exertion in your system. You raise your heartbeat, you're using the muscles because your body, that's why what it's ready to do, it's ready to save you and run away. So that's what you're doing. For some people, then the freeze element can actually be very overwhelming. All of the same reactions are happening in your body, but you're actually stuck. So you're literally almost like you're paralyzed. And often I've seen so many people who are actually glued to the bed, and people assume it's depression, but they're actually gripped with fear, dread of facing the day. It's dread. It's pure anxiety. It's like, oh my God, worst case scenario. But exercise, if you can put your 2 feet on the floor, get out of bed before you start thinking, before the thoughts start going, and utilize those hormones so that you can exercise. Now, the reason I'm saying it's non-negotiable for your teenagers is because not only will physical exercise, it doesn't have to be, it's just using their bodies, get them up and out and take them with you, but they mightn't want to be seen dead with you. There's a big difference between a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old or a 19-year-old in terms of your interaction with them. It's much easier for younger children that you can say, come on, this is where we're going. But definitely it's half an hour every day at least. Keep their bodies moving. It's going to help them feel better about themselves, so it feeds into self-esteem as well. But for you yourself, at least if you understand what are the things that actually make you anxious, what are the things that are stressing you out? What are the worries that you have? And then you start asking yourself, what are my worries? What can I do about them? And I know I said this at the talk last month, turn that worry list into a to-do list. But that's pivotal, because we often think that worrying is helpful. There's an almost addictive quality to worrying, actually. We assume that it's going to be beneficial. People often say, but I don't know what to do if I didn't worry. I've always worried. I've worried all my life. I just can't even imagine not worrying anymore. So worry doesn't change anything. So it's about changing our views about it. And that's what you're doing with your children, except you're teaching them. Ideally, what you're doing when your children are worried is that you're asking them, what is it that you're worried about? And rather than solving their problems, you're asking, what can you do about this? What do you think is the solution? What are the options here? So our tendency as parents, and I've been a parent for decades, and it's a temptation I still have to try and resist, is that you jump in to solve children's problems. We all do it. But that's not actually helpful to children. Children, it feeds their self-esteem, it actually builds their resilience that they have, that they feel that they're able to make plans, and the successful plans. And even if the plans don't work out well, it's like always, well done for trying. So we have to be very careful about how involved we become with our children in that problem-solving process, because it is a natural thing that we jump in and do it. Now, am I okay to keep going, or are there questions? I'm okay, am I?
Sorry, I was on mute. You're good to keep going.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Keep rolling, you're fine.
So I keep going. Yeah. So that's in terms of anxiety, that's it. It's very physiological. It's very physical. It's a real reaction. That's what you're going to be teaching your children about. If you will know yourself, if your children are worried about something. And if you don't, and you suspect that they're quiet because there is something wrong, well then, how can you help your children unless you know what's going on for them? Now, I'm not talking about being nosy. I'm talking about chatting with your children. not talking at them, not trying to be the inquisition with its quick fire questions, but chat with your children. And it's very hard to turn around this evening now after this talk and go, right, okay, that's it, I'm going to start talking to them, if you haven't actually been in the habit of talking with them. This is something that we'd be saying is progressive always from when they're small. You chat, 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 chat. And as children get older, we keep those lines of communication open. Children are anxious because of a few different little things. That's about anxiety in the body. So we know that exercise is one thing. And to go back, the other thing is calm breathing. Calm breathing interrupts that flurry of hormones that cause all the anxious response. There's information on it on my website, carolinecrotty.ie. If anyone needs any information about that, definitely just Jackie, send it on to Jackie and I'll help out in whatever way I can. But calm breathing.
Just to let people know, Caroline, we have put your website up on the chat box there, as well as your email address, your phone number. So people can click in from that chat box there and decide if you wish.
That's ideal. That's great. No, thanks. No, because knowing how to control your breath and breathing is actually really important, because it's something that you can teach children of any age, any adult. It doesn't matter how old you are. Being able to control your breath and breathing is actually something that will ground you. It gives you greater control. And that's really what worrying is. It's giving yourself that illusion of control when really it's not anything except misuse of your creativity and amazing imagination. So by learning how to control our breath and breathing, it will actually help children feel a little bit more grounded when they go back to school as well, because it's a huge change, you know, even for teenagers. I know the Leaving Certers are back and thrilled to be back, but it's different personalities as well. Some children are cautious about being back. They're very nervous about COVID-19. They're nervous that they'll pass it on to their grandparents and bring it home. And they're also conscious of other children not adhering to the government guidelines as much as they are, for example. So you've got mixtures of children with different levels of mixing going on outside of school, and some children will worry about that. So it's important that you're able to explain to your child that you can only do your best, because that's all any of us can do, and that we stop the judgment of others. And that's where my next point, believe it or not, is you are your child's role model. Now that might sound very simplistic, but actually it's not. There's a whole load in that. Like, what kind of role model are you? And that's why I was saying to you earlier on, are your children walking on eggshells around you because you're stressed or anxious at the moment, rather than it being the other way around? We always assume that the teenagers are causing difficulty, the teenagers are aggressive, or that teenagers are just trouble and argumentative. But how are we as parents? Are we calm? Are we easy to approach? Are we non-reactive and supportive? I am listening to children every single day. I'd say at every first session with adolescents when they come in, they do not feel that their parents understand them. They do not feel heard. They don't feel listened to. And that can sometimes be just a mismatch, that the children believe that their parents have bigger expectations than they do. Sometimes children are compared to other older siblings who may be brilliant academically, and you know, those comparisons will never work. They'll never work. All they do is make children feel that they're inadequate, that they're not as good as, or I am not enough. And if you really think about it, for children, as a role model, you're teaching them self-belief, how to feel good about themselves, how to be confident enough to make good decisions, how to say no, how to say yes. You're teaching them how you're modeling that good behavior in them. And if you're modeling that good behavior that you want to see in your children, it also means that you are careful about what you say in front of your children, including your teenagers, that you are not complaining about your neighbors, that you're not giving out, that you're not ultra negative, that you are not ultra positive, that you actually, because I hear an awful lot now about toxic positivity as well as toxic negativity, so that the world is amazing and everything is fine, and you know, if you do your calm breathing, everything will be perfect and you'll live a happy life. That's that's not real. It's not real. We have to be real about this. Not everybody is going to like me or you or your children, and they won't click with everybody, and they are their own independent person. But modeling the behavior that you expect in your children also means that you can't turn around to your child and say, you're not to drink, and then you're drinking, watching television at nighttime. You can't turn around and say, you're not allowed to use drugs if you have the odd joint at the weekend. You are your child's role model, even in terms of talking in a derogatory way about people, even about sexuality, for example. How easy would it be for your child to come and say to you then that they're uncertain about their sexuality as a teenager if you were saying awful things about commenting on other people's sexuality? So it's something to keep in mind. Be very careful about the things that you say, because that is what your child is going to take in. And children will make up their own reality, by the way. Even if you're not saying something, you may actually have no issue with your children and what they say to you, but your child, if they're hearing something negative, that is what they'll take in. And that's what I mean by children will make up their own reality. Unless you're very explicit and say to your child, I love you unconditionally, full stop. No, it's not easy to love your child unconditionally. I love your child unconditionally, but your behavior is unacceptable. And never withhold hugs, even from your teenagers, even when they're in the height of trouble, because a hug will always say you are loved. This is really upsetting, and what you have done is not what we would have expected, but I still love you. Hugs are very healing. Jack, were you going to say something, or did I imagine it? No.
We have, sorry, my mute was on. We have a couple of
Okay.
questions. So
yeah.
just, I'll put two of them together because they're kind of on the same area. And they are, if your kids won't talk and won't tell you what is wrong, and don't want to be seen with you, what you do, because you were talking there about talking and chatting with them.
Yeah.
And there was another one similar to that was also saying what you do when you've tried everything and failed. So two of them are similar in that.
What do you do when you try everything and failed? Oh, you just keep trying. But that's about, and I think it can also be about how you ask the question. Like, I know there's something wrong. What's wrong? That's, there might be nothing wrong. Your child might just be feeling off. Like, they can actually feel very up and down because they are an absolute
roller coaster.
Hormones. Yeah, they are. It's a roller coaster of hormones as a teenager. So they could actually be feeling off. They might be worried. They might be exhausted, tired, because that's the difficulty. And I will come on to that about social media, or actually I might just talk about it now. Phones at nighttime. Yeah. So what do you do? I would say keep talking, keep chatting, find an opportunity every day to praise them for something in terms of the soft skills. So you're chatting about them, about things like, I love the way you do that. That's brilliant. I'd never have thought of putting that color with that. It's all praising soft skills. You're very gentle. You're such a good listener. I love the way and it is about praising, but it's nothing to do with academics. Asking questions is not the way to get information out of them. Taking them for a walk so that you're side by side, in the car going somewhere so that you're side by side, rather than this eyeballing. And it's very difficult, even for an adult, to sit in front of somebody and then have a quick fire round of questions. Like, if I were to say, Jackie, I know there's something wrong, you've got to tell me what it is. Like, immediately we're like, oh, I'm not telling you.
Why is she sitting in front of me and asking me this directly is what's going on in my head. It's like headlights, isn't it?
And that's exactly what it is. Just for like
teenagers.
Headlights, and caught in the headlights. But we are ourselves, for adults ourselves. It's much easier if we're chatting with somebody that we're out walking, because actually your vision is on something else, and the focus isn't completely on you, and you can actually not pay as much attention to that person. So you're not thinking about what you're saying in the same way as if you were one-to-one conversation. But I would say keep trying. But it's how can I help you? It's not tell me what your problems are. It's how can I help you? What can we do? What do you think might help? I'm here for you. I'm here for all the small stuff. I'm here for the big stuff. And then, but that means then you cannot react if you do hear something that you don't want to hear. Like, we don't know what the worries are, but to say that you've tried and failed, you're not ever going to fail. Your parenting means that you are there. That you are there. I am your number one support. I am your ally. Like, that is the point. You are the child's cheerleader. It's not about I failed and they're not talking. Then it's like, what will we do? What would help? And it might be speaking to somebody outside of the family.
Okay.
So if it is talking to somebody like me, grand. Child might not actually want to say
to their parents.
Yeah, and that's not an issue. You know, that's why I'm saying it's not an issue. Or if it's the other parent, or if it's an aunt. Don't ever
Yes.
become precious about who it is that your child is talking to, as long as it's a trusted member of the family. You know, so if it is dad or if it is somebody else. But you know, often children will find it much easier to talk to aunties or to aunties' husbands or, you know, that type of thing, because they don't think it's going to go back. Well, probably should go back, but.
Do you mind if I just run through? There's a couple of more questions
No.
and they've been waiting.
Yeah.
So my 16-year-old is in therapy for 5 years, anxiety and OCD, and has also a hidden disability. I've guided her with reflexology and breathing, etc., to no avail. She used to be so sporty, but her physical illness stopped that. Have you any other suggestions, please?
Oh, physical illness stopped. I guess when the swimming pools are open.
It's a back,
you know, because we're weightless. Yeah, I would say that when the swimming pools are open, it is something that, because your body is different,
submerged,
with injuries, or you just it's a different sensation. Maybe something like a progressive muscle relaxation, so that you read the script. If you want to send me an email, I'll send you some links.
Great, thank you, Caroline.
You know,
for that.
so that you could do it, but it is very much back to, again, like physical. Depending on what the issue is, that physical exercise, particularly for girls, is very relevant, because you know, for bone density, and that it's, you know, because teenagers are never thinking about they're not thinking about when they're older, but mirror that. Absolutely. But mirror that, those things that you want for your daughter as well, but maybe take the focus off and give her choices.
So if that parent
wants to do this or this. Oh yeah, if that parent wants
to email you, Caroline's information is on the chat box there on your right. And I'm going to move on to one more, Caroline, before you can
and just to say that I'll give that person a couple of names, because it's not my forte, but I'll give her some names, but I will give links to the guided meditations and that. Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. And so we have a request for a suggestion how to present and support leaving certs in this particular time of year. And it can be so difficult to enable them to make decisions that are so important for their future.
It can, but I think they probably have now. I don't have a leaving cert student in the house, but I'm working with a lot of them, and they actually feel that they might have the best of both worlds, because my understanding is they can do the exam, so they might not do an exam in something that they have no great interest in, and take the grade that would be given, which might cut out on time for a study on those subjects that might be more demanding if you really hate a subject. It really is, the leaving cert, unfortunately, is the system that we have. There's nothing that we can do about it. But the reality is, it's not the only route to anything. There is always another way around any career, from medicine right down to you name it, and there is another way. There is always a back door. It'll take that little bit longer, but children will have the maturity of knowing what they want. I wouldn't be overly hung up, to be honest. I know this might sound like a terrible thing, especially when I've started by saying I don't have a leaving cert in the house, but in the overall scheme of things, just getting through this year and bearing in mind how difficult it has been for leaving cert students, I'd say, look, you know, this will pass. Like, this year will come and go. The leaving cert will be history. It'll be a leaving cert like no other, and that's it. You know, they'll find their feet. I'd be a lot more cautious of them regaining proper friendships and social supports, and getting them back out and feeling good about themselves, having been at home and isolated for so long. Because in a way, education, once you're in it, you know, they'll progress through it and they'll find their feet that way. But I'd say the importance really is on on how good, like really about their resilience, how they feel about themselves in terms of their self-esteem, their relationships with other people, how confident they feel, because it's all been a little bit difficult for that age group at the moment. So I know it mightn't be the answer that that person, that parent wants to hear, but I'd be saying, don't worry terribly, like they've a few months left, they can do the leaving cert or take the grades. There's always a way around if they have some sort of an idea of what they like, and the extra year might actually not do them any harm in terms of finding their feet in term next year's next year college entry. And where are they going this year? They might still actually be at home in the bedroom. So I wouldn't be over, no, I know it's probably not the right thing, but I wouldn't really be overly concerned. Like, do we all remember our leaving cert results? I mean, the leaving cert came and went. You do, oh, grand, I don't think I do. That's why, but I'm a lot older, so I give myself that excuse.
My
The
mum was
leaving
like that,
cert,
mum there, except my mum wasn't saying anything. She was afraid to say anything to me in case I'd blow up about it because I didn't want to talk about the leaving cert. I was just attending. So I think, it's one of those things. The exams don't suit me. I got on very well in life once I left the exam structure and went into
there you
third
go.
level.
And that's the point. Like, I think it's really important that you go, if my child is academic, great. If my child isn't academic, great. What is it you want from your child? Really, in the overall scheme of things, always ask yourself, what do I want from my adult child? And I always think you really, well, not everything, there won't be 100% of people, but you do want them to be financially independent, which can come from different means, not necessarily always academic, but you want them to be happy in themselves, making good decisions, kind, all those soft skills that you'd be praising. I love the way you do that. Like they're missing out in the moment on hanging out with their friends and wearing clothes that you mightn't agree with. And look, I'd always be saying, let them off, let them experiment with different clothes and let them, your hair will grow back and
It'll
you can,
return. I'm sorry now,
yeah.
Caroline, but we have
No,
three
go for it,
more
go on.
questions, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure, and I don't want to stop you out of your routine or your
No, you're
topics either.
fine.
What happens
No,
when
go on.
that when you know the truth and they lie to your face and insist they're telling the truth and you know different? Common enough
Well, this
thing.
is a very common thing, and I suppose there's a couple of different things about this. Now, you mightn't like what I'm going to say here either, but often teenagers might lie because of the reaction that's going to be anticipated. So they might feel that they have no option but to lie, and I know, like, but I suppose it depends on the style of parenting, and then I have to question, how does the parent have the information without the child having given it to them? And so there is a little bit of a disconnect with honesty, so it's going both ways in a way. So, like, the parent isn't saying, I was just talking to Mary Ryan and Mary Ryan said that the three of you were drinking the other night and you weren't where you said you were. So there's kind of, like, by omission, it's also dishonest of the parent not to say, I have this information. So perhaps the information was gleaned through covert measures. So there are two of you in it, in a way. But often for teenagers, they're not telling the truth because there's a fear of, my mother is going to explode, or dad is going to hit the roof, or I'll get kicked out of the house, or I'll have to go and live with my nan. There can be all sorts of imaginary outcomes. So this goes back to, it doesn't matter what has happened. I am here for you. I love you unconditionally. I am here. I am your support. I am your ally. There will be consequences for actions because there have to be boundaries, but this is where the boundaries come in. Do your children know what the consequences already are? Like, always involve your children in the consequences for action so that they know exactly what's going to happen if they break those boundaries. So this is real parenting 101. It's about discussing with your children, if it's found out to be that there was a deceit or that there is a lie, this is the consequence of that. So that parent has information, but they're not saying it to the child. So I suppose I wonder, why is that?
It's
Not that I'm asking the
self-reflection.
parent now.
No, but I'm hearing self-reflection, you know, because it's hard, it's a hard pill to
Yeah.
chew, isn't it? And I've had
Oh,
to chew it myself in my parenting, and the one that
yeah.
would be the best liar in my house isn't even a teenager yet, and I can't wait for that teenage years to start. But it's to do with, actually, I found, changing the subject altogether and
Yeah,
moving on, and then I would get it from that person at another stage in
absolutely.
life.
And that's the point, because you're there. You're saying,
Mm,
look, come on, I'm here. Look, whatever's happened. Not so much, I know with smaller children, it's different because it's like, I'll find out anyway, you know.
because they're under your control, kind of. And that sounds terrible. Roshan, would you like to take the next two questions so that you get to get a word in as well? Sorry.
Yeah, perfect. So the next question here is, my 18-year-old feels like he is not supported. He has ADHD and is very difficult personality, and everything ends with him saying, "Shut up talking." His behavior is deteriorating rapidly just now. We have tried everything over the years.
Yeah, and that is a really tough scenario, because now you have an 18-year-old in your hands who thinks that you have never been young and never had a life, and you have no clue what it's like to be him, and you wouldn't understand fun or anything. Like that is the difficulty with teenagers. Not even an 18-year-old with ADHD. This is teenagers do not see their parents as ever having had a life before them. In reality, I mean, you only have had sex the number of children that you've had, unless they're adopted, which sometimes your children will be going, please God, let me be adopted, because I can't believe a bloodline from my parents. So to deal with that child, I would say that we're back again in terms of I would say that this is exactly where now the being out of the house is beneficial, so that you're very calm. So I would say this is back to emotional regulation of the parent themselves. You know, nothing seems to be working. You know, I failed again. It's all terrible. Well, I'd say take a step back out of it. Take a step out of what's going on. If you were to do that helicopter view, if you could go up into a helicopter and look down on your life, what would you be seeing? What film is there? So it's just that mom or dad sounds so caught up in it that nothing is working. The child is saying, or my adult son is saying, shut up. So it's not ending with there's nothing happening with that, apart from it's ending up in the same thing, which means that it's going down the same route, which means that they're both getting caught in the circle of annoyance or aggression, or you haven't a clue. And so I would say that's exactly when you need to take an objective step away and find out what is it that's actually causing that parent to react. And maybe it is preempting the shut up. And when both of you are calm, that you have a chat about, do you know what, we have a new rule in the house, and we're not going to say shut up to each other. And if you feel that you're going to say it, and if I feel I'm going to get annoyed, we're going to work out a system. And I'd be saying this for all of the parents that are listening here tonight, having a sit down chat about what are the rules in the house, what are the boundaries, what are the expectations, so that when those boundaries are crossed and that child misbehaves in whatever way, like the shut up. Now, the child is 18, but still there. Like, our brain, it doesn't finish developing until we're about 25, 26. So it's not like your child becomes this adult who's got superior decision making and knows everything. Your child is still a child at 18. Now, I know it could be shot by other therapists for saying that, but the reality is an 18-year-old, and they're all different levels of maturity. So by sitting down and laying out the ground rules, having a chat about, look, what's acceptable, what bugs you, what's getting you riled, what's actually happening when the two of us are chatting. That's a very different approach. It is great, yeah. They've all been brilliant questions. It's a very different approach because you both stay calm. But I'd say it for all parents here tonight to have that sit down meeting and say, look, when we're getting annoyed with each other, what will we actually do? And like, I'm going to put up my hand and leave the room. You don't follow me. You know, don't ever follow somebody when they've said that this is what we're going to do.
This is enough.
You know that. Yeah.
If they say this is enough, sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah, if they say this is enough, that's perfect. Say code word, you know, this is the code word, this is the I'm leaving, so that it doesn't escalate into shut up, you know, nothing. And because all you'll remember then, all the parent is remembering is the shut up, and everything that's been said beforehand is lost. So there's no real discourse. But I'd be very, very careful about nagging and, going on and on, drilling home the same point. Be succinct in what you want to say. Yeah, that doesn't work. So like, what is the objective of a conversation with your child? What is it that, because it sounds that there's a disconnect, like maybe it's you're always saying shut up to me. And I'm not saying the parent is saying this, but hypothetically speaking. So this goes back to I statements. I feel disappointed when I don't have blah, 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 whatever it is, the I feel statements. I feel X, when, why, because Z. And it's about effective communication. And there's a little article on conflict resolution on my website, which might be very relevant, just what to do rather than getting into any conflict with anybody in your home. So at the moment, it is abnormal, it is very tense, and people are walking on those eggshells. So what is it like for that 18-year-old? What is it like to be that 18-year-old right now? How is his life? Who does he have to turn to? So if you look at it from your teenager's perspective, it might actually give a little objectivity. So like, who does that child have to turn to? If you're the ally as the parent, I'm the one that you turn to if there's anything wrong. And then there's conflict between the parent and the teenager. Who does that child actually have? So this is often why teenagers feel very disconnected from parents. And that's why, so as a role model, would I behave this way if I thought that there was a hidden camera in my sitting room? Would I speak to my child in the same way if I thought that I was being filmed, if this was being secretly recorded and it's going to go up online? Would I speak in the same way to my teenager or to any of my children? And that's a good old indicator of, if you wouldn't like anyone else to view you behaving in this way or acting in this way, well then definitely take a step back, start managing your own emotions so that you can help your child better manage theirs. And maybe the children are, yeah, sorry, Jack.
Can we do one last question, Roisin, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. How do I help my 13-year-old girl, extremely quiet and low confidence, has been totally isolated and not interacting with her peers apart from being online with classes? I would love for her to have one good friend she could rely on, but she seems to get used.
Oh, I wasn't expecting the last sentence. Yeah. I was expecting, because a 13-year-old just starting school, in first year, heading into second year, it's a really difficult time. Now, there is nothing wrong with being quiet, by the way, just to all parents out there, having a quiet child, absolutely nothing wrong at all with it. We often think that being an extrovert or being an extroverted child, that's the way forward, but actually there is nothing wrong with being quiet. The difference is if the child is quiet and wants to talk or wants to say something, that's where it can lead to difficulty, because you become not just introverted, but in your own head. So you just, I want to talk, but I don't know the right thing, and everybody else has friends. I would be encouraging as best as possible to have some level of interaction, even if it's only on Zoom or if it's online. And that can be difficult for a 13-year-old who wants to chat, but actually the way around it might be to invite a few people and to have, say, a bake-off, so that you're baking online, watching each other, and it's not this whole focus on having to have this big conversations or having to chat. The only gets used part, that is too complex to answer, because I wasn't expecting it, but not that I was expecting any of the questions, but gets used, is that then about the child not being able to say no? Or being so delighted that there is a friend? You see, there are so many different parameters to that. I just couldn't possibly answer it. But I don't worry about your child being quiet. Reassure and build. This is where the resilience element of it comes in, that you build their self-esteem, you build their self-belief, you build their ability to be able to talk and discuss how they feel, what's upsetting them. And feelings and emotions are tied into every aspect of our lives. And that's unless your children know what they feel, they can't actually explain it either. So we only ever talk kind of about, I'm feeling happy, or I'm feeling sad, or I feel tired. But there are so many emotions that children ought to be encouraged to express. So I guess I would be mindful if I were the parent of that 13-year-old, not to think that there's anything wrong with being quiet, because if we're anxious about something, we actually transfer that onto our children, unwittingly. We don't ever do it consciously, but sometimes we're afraid that the child might be like me, or the child might be like their auntie, or it might be like their dad, who's quiet and introverted. But it's unfair, because every child is unique and individual, and we accept our children just as they are. So that's why I said earlier on about, if they're academic, grand; if they're an extrovert, grand; if they're not academic, that's fine too.
And
If they're introverted, that's fine. It's all grand. It really is. So you accept your child as your child is. But I would be fostering and encouraging contact with others. And I suppose it depends then on how isolated that child feels, and whether the school, it might be, depending on the school, if it's a very small school, or if it's a very large school, depending on the supports that they have in place in the school. But I wouldn't be problematizing it either. The child might be okay, and children find their feet. They're a lot more resilient than we give them credit for as well. So I can understand how any of them will be upset and anxious going back, because it's strange not having had any contact with people apart from on Zoom. But even that, a lot of children are exactly the same. We assume that other families, they all have this great contact and they've great connection. And that's where the social media element comes in. That 13-year-old in all likelihood is watching and seeing everybody else having great friends, and they're all doing outdoor stuff. Maybe they're going for walks and they have friends, or I was talking to such a thing, because social media isn't a reality. Like, this is what we all need to explain to children as well. It's virtual. It's not the real world. So it's important that they understand the difference, that nobody really posts, I'm feeling sad and lonely, I find it difficult to connect with friends, I find it difficult to make conversation, I'm caught at lunchtime, I don't know who to hang out with at break time. And these are real worries that children have at the moment. It's a real thing. There's a lot more anxiety because of social media, because of that virtual reality. I don't mean like VR, but because of this, my life is all shiny. There's a difficulty with body confidence, particularly for girls, although it's also with boys. So it's right across the board at the moment. And that's where conversations about what's acceptable, the reason we don't have our phones in the bedroom at nighttime and we recharge them out of the bedroom, is so that it interrupts your sleep. Listen, listen, listen. Be empathetic all the time. Just because you're listening to your child, and maybe this is a key point for that mother of the 18-year-old, just because you listen doesn't mean you agree with what's being said. Okay, so your children will have different opinions. Teenage years is the time where you're pushing the boundaries for all of that. So your child is not a clone of you. They are their own independent person, and so they're entitled to be their own independent person with their own views and wishes and desires. And if you think about it, we spend so long telling children, like, say no, be independent, and then we tell them, no, I'm telling you what to do. This is the rule. When you're under my roof, these are my rules. You're not allowed to hang out with him or her. And then we say, well, be independent minded. So in order for children, like, that's a very mixed message, and we do it from when children are small. We do it from when children are small. We say things like, put on your jacket, put on your shoes. No, you're not wearing that. And then when they're teenagers, no, you're not shaving your head. You're not piercing your eyebrow. You're not allowed to do it. You're under my roof. And like, So, yeah, that's why I say hair will grow back again.
I was the shaved head
piercings for
12-year-old girl in the town, because that was said so much to me. Just on that subject now about the 18-year-old,
Yes.
that mom came back and said, thank you so much, such great advice. And the rule is always keep calm. I'm just reiterating that, since you mentioned the 18-year-old parent.
Always keep calm. It really is, you determine the reaction actually. You determine what's going to happen next. If you are somebody like that, have no taboo topics, by the way. Sex is on the cards. You must be able to be in a position to be able to talk about sex openly and freely. Like, I get told, stop, my sex life is my business. So sex, alcohol, drugs. These are conversations that all have to happen.
Right.
Children not owing money to dealers it's a huge concern and a huge worry to teenagers, because as soon as a teenager owes money, they're actually compromised. And if you owe money, you can run up fabulous debt. I mean, great debt. It's like the best bank ever. Until you have to do something then because you owe that money. So you're very compromised. And teenagers who owe money and they can clock up that debt very easily, it can honestly happen very easily. Children tell me, and they are children, that they can order any drug and it's delivered to the front door faster than a pizza or home delivery. So drugs are highly accessible, and running up credit is running up a debt because you can get it on tick. Very easy to do. So it's that they're the worries of teenagers as well. So are you the parent that your child could say that to? No, don't come off this and say, do you owe money to a dealer? Is that why you're quiet? Okay, that is not the way to play this. I am just saying teenagers can be worried about different things. And if you're there for the small things, they will tell you the big things, because who else has their back but you? So really, the leaving cert in the relative scheme of things, the leaving cert doesn't really matter. Minding their emotional health is far more important in the long run, because when they are emotionally able to deal with the challenges that life throws at them, and life will throw challenges at us, they are better equipped to deal with anything that lies ahead at third level or whatever course that they want to do. Will I still stay going, or are you okay?
Yes, do. We started late, so
Great.
carry on.
Okay, great. Okay, because I know that I have on my notes here around me that I don't even now. I know, hang on now. Listen to your teens, yes. Have clear boundaries and stick to them. Parenting Anxiety Canada.com is a great resource for anxiety.
Okay.
Anxietycanada.com. Know what makes you anxious, learn how to keep yourself calm, challenging your unhelpful thoughts. Children pick up when you're being anxious, so it's imperative you manage your emotions so that you can better help your children. Oh, okay, so what I didn't talk to you about was resilience, actually. Now, I don't have my new reading glasses on, so this is all about praising your child. I did say that to you. Having structure and boundaries. Children need structure and boundaries at every age. So this is like, these are the rules, these are the boundaries, these are the expectations. Now, the parenting style actually does have a lot to play with how you are with your children. If you are absolutely adamant that you are the rule maker, then you're not really teaching your children how to make good decisions, because you're actually making all decisions for them. So children need to have some element of involvement. Some need to feel that they are involved so that they can feel competent. Now, that might be very difficult in level 5, but I was thinking about this actually in terms of building resilience even for teenagers. And one of the things that you might suggest to them is to do something for a neighbour, even if it was to bring in coal or to load up a coal bucket or to drop a card around to a neighbour's house. And the reason I say that is, imagine how great that teenager will feel that they're after helping Mrs. Murphy down the road. So you're giving them a task, you're hoping that they'll take charge of it and do it themselves, not nagging them now overly, like going on and on again, because that nagging doesn't work. Because if anyone is nagging, all you do is just sit there and go, God, are they done yet? Like, so why would you think that nagging is ever effective? It isn't. We can spend hours revving up to say nothing, you know, really, you could have said it in a sentence. So give your teenagers tasks that they can do, which I think is beneficial to them, because it'll help build their resilience, because it gives them this sense of, I'm doing something proactive to help somebody else. But it's also, you're giving them trust. So do you trust your child? And I think it's really important to be trusted. So if you're giving your trust, it also means that if a teenager feels trusted, it's a different relationship than, I never believed, my parents won't allow me even stay in the house on my own and I'm 16 or 17. I'm not allowed to even get the bus to school because my parents don't trust that I can do it. So you wouldn't be feeling so great if you're not given any trust at all. So that's why I'm saying it, you know. So giving your child little challenges and things to do, engage them in tasks, dropping a card to a local person who might be cocooning. Teenagers need structure. Listen to your children, validate their feelings. Just because you listen doesn't mean you agree with what's being said. I have said that. Encourage them to solve their own problems, and your reaction determines what happens next. I think, now the other little thing that I haven't said actually was, I was at, oh yeah, resilience, help them deal with challenges and difficulties. Help them build self-respect and build empathy and respect and kindness. Now, that self-respect is hugely important, because if you have teenage daughters, explain to them that as soon as they click send on a picture, it's gone. They've given it to the universe. And also explain to teenage sons, we'll finish it. Okay.
No, you're not. It's okay. Intellectual property,
okay.
Caroline, you're touching on intellectual
Yes.
property, which I think
Yes.
should be a subject inside in secondary
It
school
is.
now at this stage.
Yeah.
And consent, they should be married together, because young people and their phones and their
But
sexuality.
there's a legality as well. There's a legal element to it.
But that's
yeah.
what intellectual property is. If you are discussing the sharing of a photograph that you've done as a nudie because you're going out with that fella and he shared it with all his peer group, and then you want to retract that because you're 16,
you can't.
You can't. That's what I'm on about. Like, intellectual property is what you'll be inside in court with, you know, trying to get that photograph and the legality of it back. And I suppose that's why I'm not trying to butt in on you, but I'm like, please, I would love it to be a secondary school subject, or a 13-year-old should be exposed to understanding it.
It's actually child pornography then, when the child is under 17, believe it or not. So it's somebody at 16, because if you're under the legal age of consent. So even if the children or teenagers are 17, so it's girls, as soon as they click send, it's gone. But boys, also talk to them about having respect for girls, that they don't ask for a nude pic, or that they don't ask for a sexual favor because it's their birthday. So for your daughters and sons, there's a huge element in it, even about consent. It's going to get murkier as time progresses. It definitely is. But the reality is, your daughter or son being able to say no, it's not just over their bodies. It's also about drinking, and it's also about drugs, and it's also about behaviors that they may not agree with. So always have the message that if you don't want to do something, don't do it. Pick up the phone and I'll come in straight in and collect you, or go down the road and text me and I'll be straight in. But that means then, as parents, when your child is on a night out, that doesn't give you free rein to stay at home and drink. If you say that you're going to be there for your child and available, be there and available for your child. And it's not about controlling and staying up all night, because it depends on the child's age as well, and they do have to be given an element of trust. If they're in Leaving Cert, in reality they could be off in a different city in September, living an independent life. So by then you want them to be making good decisions anyway. But self-respect is part of building resilience, and it is about teaching them to love themselves as they are. And it's not about, and that's where social media is actually very can have a negative impact on teenagers, because they see this body beautiful, which is, you know, like that changes over time. So it's only right now it'll be a certain shape or whatever. But it's difficult for teenagers to actually feel that they're loved and wanted, and that they fit in, and that they're the same as whoever it is. But that's where the role as a parent comes in, of reinforcing how wonderful and unique and individual and special. And it's not about special above all else, but it's just that it's about being there for your child. You are your child's ally. And if you're not, you've got to reflect, why not? Your children didn't ask to be born, as my mother used to always say. Those children didn't ask to be born. But it is important. Like, you are there for your child. People put a lot of pressure on their children to be a certain way. You know, like, oh my God, I've no independence because of you. You're ruining my life. Or I rue the day that, you know, I have no freedom because I'm at home every night trying to mind you. How good will those children feel? It's a really difficult job. There's no perfect parent. So just be careful about what you say, empathize, listen, praise. That's it.
It's a devotion, Caroline. I heard it in this house recently. My other half said it, he declared it here one evening. Being a father and a parent is a devotion. I thought it was so
Devotion,
wise.
I love it.
It was so
I love
wise of him. I always associated devotion with the nuns or with,
It's a
you know,
devotion and with a
a
religious
nurse.
element.
Yeah.
But it's a really, no, that's brilliant. It is, but it is about being there, and it's easy when everyone is quiet. But I'd always say, is it really? Just because children are quiet doesn't mean that they're okay. You might have little worriers on your hand, and just because children are doing really well in school, it can also bring huge pressure to them, because if I don't get, I always got an A. Yeah. So life is not about academic achievement. Life is a lot more about feeling good within your body. Like I said last month, waking up in the morning and feeling good and going, you know what, I'm grand. I like me. I'm happy being me. I can still set goals and targets. So I'll stop because I'll stay going, honest to God.
And finding a happy medium space is another thing, I guess, that we could instill into young people, you know, or teach, because it's something I found hard as a 20-something to learn, was finding that happy medium. You know, when I heard that one time, I was like, you're joking me, like being medium or normal is okay. Or yeah, I found it alarming that happy medium is actually the okay space to be in, you know.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And I think that's about parents also allowing that element of parents allowing children to make their own decisions, you know, giving them the freedom to make mistakes. Not to say don't date him, or she's a lovely girl, you know, be with her. It's like, just allow children to make their own mistakes, because they will learn from them.
From that dating,
you know, so that's where the happy medium. Well, from everything. Yeah, from everything. Like, it doesn't even have to be dating, but it's giving them freedom.
Don't date them or him, whichever it is, can create the Romeo and Juliet, and then you've got them all trying to elope together. You know, that's the other side of it. If you're going to create the forbidden fruit,
I know all about that.
It will be.
I remember it well.
Yeah, so do I. Like, but the more, like, we come from, I think, our generation where we weren't allowed an awful lot more. You know, and you know,
we didn't have access to the same information, Jackie. Sorry for interrupting, but like we didn't. The world was not as open. And that is also, it's a benefit, but it's also a cross, because it means that young children have access to all information, you name it. So it's up to parents then to be able to, and it's up to parents then to be able to decipher how to teach their children how to let go of this stuff. It's not all of benefit, that we need to disconnect. No phones at meal times, no phones in the bedroom at night time. It impacts with sleep. Get out, reconnect, disconnect from technology to reconnect with your children. And you are the role model. Do you have the phone? Are you checking emails while you're having breakfast? No.
Okay, and reconnect.
That's it. The end.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you everybody for joining us and staying with us this evening.
We went over.
No, we went. I'm just going to let everybody know we went over by 10 minutes purely because we were 5 minutes later in starting. I just wanted everybody to make sure they had a chance to get in because we were late going live. And thanks to everybody who has stayed with us this evening. Again, now our numbers are going up on your screen. East Limerick Family Support Network, who have hosted this for you this evening. And with the accompaniment of Roisin from ISPCC and Vivian, who's my fellow family support worker for Ballyhara. You have been listening to Caroline Crotty. Her email address and her website have been going up there on the screen at the very bottom there, and her telephone number. Also in the chat box, we have put a hyperlink there if you want to copy it, guys. It's the Ballyhara website that has all the recordings from these family support talks that we've been hosting since November. And these two, as in tonight and the one we had last week, will also be going up there, and there'll be 6 family support talks there for you. They're well worth copying that link over so you can have it to watch at your own time. They're all on YouTube, and they're very handy because you can click in and out of it and pause it whenever you want to suit your family scenario. Caroline, it's been absolutely wonderful to have you again. It's been great to have you speak on the subject of living with teenagers in lockdown. I hope it has been of benefit to people out there who are in the middle of that. I hope everyone is doing okay, and look, we're all here for you as far as the supports are concerned. Caroline with psychotherapy, Roisin, ISPCC, and Vivian and myself, Ballyhara, and we have Laura then from Croom Family Resource Centre. And
thanks a million, Caroline. That was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it was
Thank you,
brilliant.
Laura.
So much, very
Thanks.
enjoyable.
Yeah,
Thank
very
you.
interesting. Thank you.
Thanks a million.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody, and stay in tune. We will be back with another series of talks, I'm sure, in the coming months. And
Yeah.
I wish everybody a very happy Easter when we get there.
And
Next
Mother's Day.
season.
And Mother's Day.
Oh, happy
Day.
Mother's
Yes.
Day, everybody out there.
Happy
There
Mother's
is 14
Day.
mothers out there still listening to us, I imagine, in houses, and they're living with teenagers. So have a very happy Sunday on Sunday. And you know what, make Sunday your self-care day.
Yes.
And tell them all at
Yeah.
home that Caroline Crotty issued it. And she was the expert of self-care. Don't even mention that you were listening to anything about teenagers. Just tell them you're listening to the expert on self-care, and she has
No
made
expert.
Sunday your self-care. Do make Sunday your self-care day and run the bath and just stay in the bathroom and chilling out for the day, listening to lovely music. I heard a woman tell me, a mother in a parenting group one time, she was an English lady now, because this is why I would say this, that her mother used to always go for a big long soak in the bath. She never understood why her mother loved baths so much, but then she had children herself and realized why. And she used to always put a cricket bat outside the door when she would soak in the bath. That's it. And she realized when she was older.
Whatever works.
Yeah, that was the sign. Don't come near the bathroom. I'm
The
soaking
do not
in the
disturb
bath.
sign.
Yeah, a cricket bat while she soaked. But you know, that's what mothers do. Some
Needs
mothers.
must.
Thank you, everybody. Look, good night.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
guys.
Good night.
Thanks
for all your
Good night.
support.
Safe night.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Caroline.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks a million, guys. See you.
Thanks. Bye, Roisin.
Bye.